Games interest me for the following reason. You have alternating quantifiers. I mean, I'm searching for the move, does it exist, such that for all moves of my opponent, I will have a move, in other words, there will exist a move for me, such that for all moves of my opponent, and so on. And they've got the longest strings of alternating quantifiers in the business. And I think that's why they're interesting, really. And I don't know how much you know of sort of logic and stuff, I mean formal mathematical logic, but if you take strings of quantifiers on arithmetical statements, then you classify statements as A statements if there's one universal quantifier, or E statements, and then there are AEAs, and if you ever have two together, you fuse them. If there exists a X and there also exists a Y and there was no universal in between, then you might as well say there exists a pair XY and so on. So that they're all alternating. And then there was a question that interested Hilbert and Ackermann, his student, and a few other people. What is the logical complexity of these difficult statements, and they proved results like if there are only two quantifiers in your arithmetical statement, it's decidable. But I forget which is the first one, AEA or EAE, that already includes some undecidable statements and so on. There are also results about undecidability of games. And in fact, for quite some time, there are two different sources in which game theory entered into logic. One of them is the so-called axiom of determinacy. It's a theorem for finite games. Let's say you've got a game of the type that it always ends after a finite number of moves, and when it ended, there's some little function that tells you whether it's, who won.
And in a finite game, there's always a winner.
Yes, there is. But in an infinite game, that isn't necessarily so. And there are these games due to Banach and other Polish logicians in which you name an interval on the real numbers, then I name a subinterval of that, and let's say we impose the condition that my interval is at most half as long as yours, and we keep on imposing that condition. So we're naming a shrinking sequence of intervals, and that will converge to a point. And then if this point is in such and such a set, then you win, and if it's in the complement of that set, I win. And it's easy to see, suppose you make the set be the rationals, or it's really a partition of the reals. Suppose that's the partition between rationals and irrationals, then it's pretty obvious the irrational player wins. And it's not only pretty obvious, it's provable, because if I'm the player playing for irrationals, at my nth go, I choose an interval that doesn't contain the nth rational number. That works also if the set is not a countable union of nowhere dense sets. Banach proved that if neither the set nor its complement is a countable union of nowhere dense sets, then there isn't a winning strategy for either player. So that's how game theory first got entwined with point set theory and logic and so on. The proof of that, by the way, involves the use of the axiom of choice. So if you don't believe the axiom of choice,
you can have the axiom of determinacy.
You can have the axiom of determinacy that says every game has a winning strategy for one or other of the two players. Every game of a suitable type. And it turns out that although that negates the axiom of choice, it implies the axiom of countable choice and various other specializations. And it in fact it implies everything that you ever use in classical analysis. You don't really use the full strength of the axiom of choice, except to prove that certain nasty sets exist. You know, the first real use of it is to prove that there's a non-measurable set. Well, you know, you can perfectly well suppose the axiom of determinacy, and then every set is measurable, and analysis looks a lot nicer, you know. I mean, nobody really does it that way, but it's an alternative universe which in many ways has nicer properties than the real one, and it enables you to do all of good classical mathematics, let's say all of pre-1900 mathematics, you know, perfectly well. It's a rather nice thing. Anyway, the consistency of the axiom of determinacy is a sort of big deal. It's not provable, you know, from the other axioms of set theory. So if you adopt this axiom, you're stepping into dangerous territory, you know. You can never be quite sure that what you do is right. But that's true already.
Of choice, isn't it?
Sorry?
It's true of choice as well.
Yeah, if you, it's true of all the other axioms, you know, the consistency of any system that suffices to prove the standard things about arithmetic can't be proved without talking about a stronger system, which is really begging the question.